Welcome, future doctors, to another episode of the Future Minority Doctor podcast with Dr. Sulma
and Marina, where we bring you conversations to empower and inspire you to contribute to your community and the world by becoming a doctor. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Future Minority Doctor podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm delighted to introduce our guest, who is Jocelyne Munoz. She is a third-year medical student at Noorda College of Osteopathic Medicine, which is in Utah. And she is originally from Arizona, which she'll tell us a little bit more about. Thank you so much, Jocelyne, for being here today.
Hi, Dr. Capel. Thank you so much for having me. I'm truly humbled that you invited me to be on the podcast.
Yes. Well, I think our listeners would really benefit from hearing about you and hearing your story about your journey into medicine. I had the privilege of getting to know you because you're doing your pediatrics rotation in my clinic in Salt Lake City. And it's been a delight having you in the clinic and learning more about you and your background. I think you're an example of someone who had to kind of overcome a lot and really be persistent and stay on the path and really practice grit in order to get to medical school. But I mean, you're so much stronger because of it, and it really shines through. So I'd love to share with our listeners more about your story. Tell us, to begin with, a little bit about your background.
Sure. So where do we start? Let's see. So I was born in Arizona in a border town to Mexico. So I grew up going to Mexico pretty often, almost every weekend. And I went to college in Ohio. So just had a change of scenery there, geographically, environmentally. And then I moved to Colorado for the mountains and actually also ended up going to grad school in Colorado. And then now I'm in Utah. So a little bit of everything.
Excellent. Yeah. What motivated you to relocate to Ohio for college? Were you just looking for a new experience? And then what was good about it and what was maybe a little hard about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just wanted something different. I wanted to expand my horizons, and the school I went to really promoted service learning as well as global learning. And I really actually got to get that experience there. And I just wanted to go somewhere different that my classmates or family wasn't at. So I was just excited to be in a different environment. So have the 4 seasons and just learn from being in a different environment. And it actually ended up being a wonderful time studying abroad and really liking my professors. I went to a small private liberal arts school. So I don't really have those in Arizona or as many, I guess. Yeah. And I really enjoyed just representing my community because I was a minority there compared to Arizona. I was one of many Hispanics, especially in high school. I was the majority, and I went to somewhere that I was one of a few in my class, in my activities, and pretty much everything. I was always a minority, but it kind of strengthened me to get more, pride and represent who I am and where I come from, if that makes sense. So it was challenging in that way, right? Because you have to adjust to it because it's not something that comes natural, I guess. But with experience, I learned, okay, it's okay to be the only one. I just have to be proud of where I come from and know that everything I do represents my family and my community. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, what was your big motivator for going into medicine? Did it connect to, kind of that identity and that community that you came from? Or was it something during college that piqued your curiosity? What was your why for medicine?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you hit it spot on. My community is my number one motivator. I wanted to be the provider that my community needs, that I needed growing up, that my family needed growing up or throughout our lives. So one that could be culturally competent to the extent of what the word now is being defined these days, but one that could understand the background and social factors, economic factors of being in part of that community and the experiences that community members face. And so just wanted to be able to listen to my patients and just be more compassionate to their needs. And so really just bridge the gap in those numbers, because we know that although the Hispanic population is growing, the number of physicians isn't matching that. And so I would definitely want to cover that gap and provide skills and knowledge so that my patients can be empowered. And so, yeah, throughout college, I had various experiences. Like I was a PT tech, physical therapy tech, and that added to my experience indirectly, because I got to explore that field, and that aided me with some skills of like the body and how it heals. And so little experiences throughout college that did push me forward, I think, towards medicine. So I actually had been considering medicine in my freshman year of college, but I took general chemistry, which is a requirement for pretty much all med schools and undergrads. And it's known as a weed out course, right?
Yeah.
And it pretty much did weed me out during the years of college, because I didn't do that well in the class. It was very challenging, to be honest. And with those results, I brought myself down. I was like, if I'm not doing well in this course, how am I expected to do well in medicine and in the harder courses and in med school? And so I was the one who talked myself out of pursuing medicine, even though I had that interest. But throughout those experiences in college, like doing research and doing community service, I volunteered at a free clinic where I aided with triage and translating between patients and physicians and providers. And those experiences always brought me back to, I want to be a provider. I want to provide care. And so they always brought me back. But in my mind, I had talked myself out of it. And so it wasn't until, I guess, long story, kind of touching on a lot of points here, but I guess I decided until senior year of college to actually go for it and to actually pursue medicine. And I realized that like I was the only one stopping myself from pursuing medicine, that in reality, like that course didn't have to define my outcome and how good of a doctor I would be. And that's actually one of the lessons that really has continued throughout all these years to really be foundational, that like you're only gonna go as far as you let yourself be, that your biggest enemy, quote unquote, is yourself. Because if you tell yourself you're not gonna do something or achieve something, then it's likely that you're not, right? To the extent of that, of those words. But so it really taught me like, wow, the only person that is preventing me from reaching this interest of mine that I clearly have a passion for is myself. So just seeing the need that my community has and seeing my interest in medicine itself, like the science, the physiology, the microbiology, because I studied microbiome and Spanish in college, and being able to implement that background, and also just a passion for learning, right? Because you're a lifelong learner in this field. I think all those things combined for me to prove that I should go for this, right? And and here we are.
Wonderful. Yes. And I mean, what an accomplishment for you to have overcome all that. And your story is not unique. I mean, it is, but the story of chemistry being a weeder course is not unique. I hear that from so many students, that they allow themselves to get discouraged by biology or chemistry or organic chemistry or physics, or a biology lab. And those are known to be hard courses. And sometimes they're really competitive because it's a lot of students that are competing to get the best grades so that they can get into medical school, right? And so you get a lot of so-called gunners in those courses, right? But it's not impossible for anyone to learn those things. That doesn't mean that you're going to be good at it immediately. But I think if you don't, just like you said, you were the one stopping yourself, right? And anybody that struggles in any of those courses, they have a choice. They have a choice. Am I going to let this grade define me and defeat me? Or am I going to just say, okay, I have something to learn and I'm going to keep trying. And the more I try, the more I learn. And the more, the more I learn, the closer I get to my goal. So thank you for sharing that, because I think so many people are afraid to share that part of their story and admit that it was a struggle, right? There's so much shame and like secretiveness about it. And I think the more of us can come out and say, hey, I really struggled and I almost gave up. Please, this is what I learned. Then the more of us can be motivated to just like, hey, keep going. This is a normal experience. So many people go through it. It's okay. So thank you for sharing that. And what was your journey like? So you mentioned that in your senior year is really when you decided, okay, I'm really going to go for it. But by that time, I imagine that maybe you had to catch up on some courses. You had to, brush up on the skills to take the MCAT. Did you take a couple of gap years to kind of finish everything you needed to do and then apply?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up real quick that I think being vulnerable, like what I'm sharing now, is so important, because I think sharing things like this is what can help empower others, especially in our community where we don't have a lot of mentors, where we don't know a lot of people in this field. I don't have anyone in my family that's in medicine, first gen college, first gen American. So I think sharing things like this insight, quote unquote, is what can help us be stronger together. And so trying to be as vulnerable as I can to share this, and in order for others to feel empowered that whatever their background is, that they can also gain a sense of empowerment from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess to add on to that, I also had challenges my freshman year with other courses, but just adjusting to college in general as well.
Yeah.
And I think that also added that mindset of like, well, I'm already struggling in undergrad. How am I expected to do well in med school, right? And I think that also added, and that could be to various factors, like the type of high school I went to, the type of exam skills I had. So a lot of factors, right? So then I guess back to the journey, I decided my senior year, and I actually had the actual med school advisor for our school, our undergrad, reach out to me because, long story short, he saw me on this like poster that our school had written about me, about my goals and what I had in store since I was a senior. And that advisor saw that, and they realized they hadn't met with me as a pre-med advisor because they saw that I wanted to pursue medicine at that point. And so I ended up meeting with them, even though this advisor had a reputation of not being the most encouraging to students. And it actually, in my experience, ended up being true for me, that when I met with them, they were actually trying to dissuade me from pursuing medicine, and pretty much telling me that I should change my mind, that trying to tell me all these things, how hard it was. And I try to reframe it in a way that, they're just trying to help me see that it is a tough path, right? But in reality, they were like, yeah, maybe you should do something else with your degree, like, right?
Yeah.
And so instead of feeling discouraged, which I was for a second, I told myself, hey, I still want this, even though this person that knows a lot about this field is trying to change my mind. I still know in deep within me that I want this, and that if I don't at least try, I'm going to regret that. And I think it was one of many hurdles or barriers that I faced, that to me proved to myself that I did want this, and proof that I should go for it as well. And so, I told myself I'm actually going to prove this person wrong, that I can do this. And that also, it was interesting because this advisor didn't know anything about me in terms of my grades. They didn't know anything about me, like what courses I had taken. They were just trying to tell me that I should just change my mind, maybe because it was senior year. I don't know why they thought this, and I'm not going to speculate why they were saying that. But yeah, so then in terms of the courses, so since I was a micro major, I actually throughout my undergrad, I thought I was going to pursue a PhD in research for microbiology.
Uh-huh.
And so I had a lot of the bio courses,
Yeah.
but I didn't have like the orgo or physics because it wasn't required for my degree. So I was like, I'm not going to take over that required.
Yeah.
But so then I learned through a lot of research because I actually, at that point, I was almost graduating and clearly this med school advisor wasn't that encouraging. So I had to find all these things myself, like how to apply to med school, what the process is like just by searching. And I ended up finding, I don't know, God just placed her in my path and she became my mentor. She was like a few years ahead of me, but had gone to a different school and ended up being in med school like 3 years ahead of me. And so she was also a minority. And so she had experienced similar struggles. And so I was blessed to find her. And she also helped guide me with the limited time that we were able to meet and whatnot. But I ended up doing prereqs, which are the requirements for med school, for a few years while I worked full time in a hospital, Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. It was that or a post-bac program. But that would have been full time. And they did have a good option of a linkage program to their med school. But I went the route of working at this hospital because it seemed super interesting. It was in gene therapy, so gene therapeutics. Nice. And I also needed a way to pay for courses.
Yeah.
And so it ended up being great because as I reflect back, I know that I got the experience in the research field because I did have an interest in research. And my experience helped prove to me, hey, I don't want to just work in a lab. I want to work with real people and not just a microscope. However, it was interesting, but I need people contact besides my colleagues. Like I want to work with patients because we actually, some of the products that did end up becoming used for clinical trials, I got to see them being delivered or in some cases, we'll just say delivered patients themselves, which were children. And that was just a one-day thing, right? One-day event. And just seeing how that child was impacted from this therapeutic and like how, like just that whole process and being able to interact with them and things like that just made me like, I want to be on the patient side of this, like the provider who links them to these therapeutics, for instance. And so just like little things like that just continue to prove to me like, this is what I want, right? So so I got to gain experience there, also got work experience as a young professional, right? Got skills from working there at that hospital. And then I also took the prereqs part-time, which was challenging because you're working full-time, tired from working in a lab, and then you have to go take a course in physics at 8 p.m. while you're trying to stay awake. And then your Saturday is anatomy lab for all day pretty much because it's lecture and lab. So it was very challenging physically and very demanding. But again, those years proved to me like, wow, like I can get through this, and just proved so many things to me about how I wanted this. And then I ended up moving to Colorado because my partner at that time was there. And I, at that point, worked as a caregiver for a special needs patient and indirectly was patient care. And again, provided me the experience like, wow, this is so interesting. While also studying for the MCAT, which is a whole challenge in and of itself, and also taking the prereq classes within that. So I think I had that journey between undergrad and including my master's, 2017 to 2022, I think I got into med school. So during that period, I call my non-traditional years because traditional students go from undergrad to med school, right? But to me, those years, I am so glad I actually had them because it
Mm-hmm.
made me, I believe, a stronger, not only candidate for med school, but
Mm-hmm.
also a better physician because I gained experience in all these areas in life. Literally,
Mm-hmm.
I'm an older student compared to most of my classmates.
Yeah.
I also got to travel for fun, which is something that I'm passionate about. I got to do a lot of things in development, both professionally and personally.
Uh-huh.
So I think those non-traditional years, not only did they prepare me for medical school, right, taking that MCAT, working because I had to pay for my classes, pay for rent, pay for food, right? And also take my prereq courses. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a little bit of a longer route compared to if I had done that post-bac
Mm-hmm.
program for, I think it was 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy that I did it for all the many reasons that I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that you
Yeah.
mentioned.
Thank you for sharing all that. I think I've worked with many non-traditional students who kind of took several gap years between college and entering medical school. And honestly, I feel like it just like you said, it makes you a stronger candidate because you have that work experience. You've polished your professional skills. You've polished your communication skills. You've had to practice working on teams within a work setting or
Mhm,
professional setting. You just have like more life experience, more
mhm,
lessons learned, more ability to have compassion for other people who have had different experiences in life. And so it's really okay. Like some
mhm,
people get really
mhm,
stressed out that it's like, oh no,
mhm,
I'm going to be so much older, or
mhm,
I'm not going to be this, the same exact stages as all of my
mhm,
peers. And it's
mhm,
okay. Like you're still going to be a fantastic physician. In fact, you may even be a stronger physician because of the experiences
mhm,
that you have accumulated. And I think you're a wonderful
mhm,
example of that. So let's fast forward a little to like
mhm,
the year of applying to med school. What was the
mhm,
biggest challenge about applying to med school?
mhm. So I would say that it was the years applying because I
Yeah.
actually applied 2 cycles. So my first cycle, I just applied to MD schools. And I actually at the time didn't really know what DO schools were, had maybe heard of it in the passing through like a friend of a friend, but didn't
Mhm.
really know much about it. So that first cycle, I applied to just MD schools and
Mhm.
again, didn't really have much mentorship or resources or connections, I guess you could say. And so just applied. And looking back, when I reviewed what I could improve on for the second cycle, I was like, oh, okay, here are these things, met more people through networking. And I actually found a mentor through Instagram, which is such a
Yeah.
small world that was, yeah. So then the second cycle, I did apply to both allopathic and osteopathic schools. And I also took the MCAT twice. So
Mhm.
the first cycle I had taken it, and then I was like, oh, it's probably, I need to improve on my MCAT because I didn't do well actually.
Mhm.
And so I took that twice. And then, yeah, that just learned things here and there about how to improve the application because I had a lot of like activities. I had a lot of things to say in the descriptions and things like that.
Mhm.
But I think it was formulating it in the way that was
Mhm.
needed. So I think more than anything, it was just more than the time like that it took to reevaluate and
Yeah.
rewrite things. And when I think it was more of the emotional aspect of, hey, I
Yeah.
have to do this again, like what, like, and trying to prevent yourself from going down the, well, am I not good enough? Well, what's wrong with like what's,
Yeah.
and being hard on yourself and
Mhm.
saying, well, should I give up? Well, like, is it
Mhm.
even worth all this money? Because even though I did apply for FAP, which is the fee assistance program,
Yeah.
which made like application a little more affordable, I still needed to find ways to
Yeah.
pay for the amount that was not covered.
Yeah.
And so besides the financial aspect, it was more of that like turmoil within myself. It's like, well, why am I not getting it right? And more about self doubt, right? But then I
Yeah.
was like, well, and if I don't apply, what will I do? Will I be okay with going into a different field or pursuing
Yeah.
nursing or PA or something similar?
Mhm.
But within me, I was like, no, the impact that I want to have in my community is achievable as a physician, right? And not to say
Mhm.
that those other careers in medicine won't do that. They do have an impact in patient care, but to the extent that I want is as a physician, right?
Mhm.
And educating patients
Mhm.
and making them feel heard. And I want to go into surgery. So making something so daunting feel less scary and something that they feel cared for because they understand why they need it and what's going to happen, right? And
Mhm.
so to me, like, it felt an urgency and besides like the interest in science and besides all,
Yeah.
it was still felt like a calling or that I can be there for my
Mhm.
community. So again, it just brought me back to, hey, like this
Mhm.
application will be worth it. This studying
Yeah.
for this MCAT will be worth it, right?
Yeah.
This money, I won't even like remember down the road how much I spent. Sure, I'll remember it might have been a lot, but
Yeah.
I'll be doing what I want, right? So it's
Yeah.
all like an investment in time, financially, everything.
Yeah.
And it's all about how you choose to see it and how much you let it affect you, right?
Mhm.
Because I told myself this exam, this MCAT
Mhm.
doesn't define me. It doesn't define how good of a doctor I will be, how caring I can be, how I will do in my courses. It doesn't define anything other than an exam that was made by someone that looks very different than me and has a
Mhm.
very different background than me. So it wasn't designed for me to achieve it, but I will still take it because it is part of the process. And so, yeah, and just not letting it stop you. So I think that actually that is a lesson or a theme that I have seen throughout
Mhm.
med school is how much you let a score or a grade or a number define you, right? Because it's good for it to give you confidence and whatnot, but it also doesn't define how good of a doctor you will be, right? And how much you let it affect you, right? So yeah, it's a constant reminder that I actually have kept throughout these years because you are still getting grades in med school. Well, at least at my school,
Yeah.
you do get grades. You do get
Uh-huh.
scores for your class exams. And you
Mhm.
continue to take board exams, right? And those do have
Mhm.
scores, or if they're pass or fail, but it's always about like how much are you going to let results affect you, right? And so,
Mhm. Yeah.
anyways, I'm digressing, but
That's
yeah,
okay.
it's a big lesson.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So you kind of touched sort of on my next question, which was like, what has med school been like? As you mentioned, you continue. I mean, part of the reason that I think the MCAT is there is that you have to get to some extent comfortable taking tests. You have to be confident in your own abilities to some degree, right? You don't have to
Mhm.
get a
Of course.
525, whatever, but you have to at
Mhm.
least have some baseline
Of course.
ability and comfort and
Mhm.
confidence with test taking
For
in order
sure.
to survive medical school, right? So some of
For
those
sure.
challenges, they only strengthened you in order to
Mhm.
have the strength needed to make it through the years that you are now making it
Mhm.
through successfully.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, like, what's been your favorite part of medical school so far?
Oh man, this year, third year, is a
Mhm.
rotation year. So I am seeing patients every day, and that is my
Mhm.
absolute favorite.
Uh,
It made first and second year of just coursework like
yeah.
worth it, or it made it like, oh, I can see why we were in class all the time. So we can learn that, so we can
Yeah.
apply it, so that we can get that foundation knowledge, so
Uh-huh.
that now that we have patients in front of us, we can use that knowledge and those
Mhm.
tools, right? And all those OSCEs we had and actually like prep you.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite part is actually being able to apply what we learn and learning the medicine part itself, right? Because
Yeah.
the courses in med school are very different than the undergrad or prereq courses. They have transferable skills, like you still have to know lots of things, but the physiology of when things go wrong, that's what I like to learn because you know
Mhm.
how it's supposed to be normally. And when things aren't functioning like they should, That's my favorite
Mm.
part, because it's, oh, so then we're going to see this clinical
Yeah.
manifestation of that. So
Right.
it's like tying things together. I really like just putting certain clues together, which you do
Yeah.
in the clinic and in exams. So just what we're learning and applying that and having to think through things, I really enjoy that, even though it can be challenging because it's a step up, right? From just taking a course and, oh, you need to remember this is this
Mhm.
bone, right? No, this is a
Yeah.
step beyond, because this is
Right.
what it looks like, or this is what it will look like
Uh-huh.
when it's not functioning properly. So it's
Yeah.
like beyond. So I really
Right.
like that. You know, it can be challenging because you have to remember 3 degrees of that
Yeah.
knowledge. I don't know. I think that's really fun to work forward and reverse. Well, I know this is how
Mhm.
normally, or this is what I'm seeing. Now let me go backwards. And it's like, well, if I'm seeing this manifestation, oh, well, then if I look backwards or go backwards, and oh, it must be from this
Yeah.
organ, or this must be not working, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. So I
Yeah.
guess that's
Makes
what
sense.
being a physician is.
Mhm.
I guess that defines
Yeah.
being a physician, right? Because you're the
Uh-huh.
one figuring that out, right? And to me, that's why medicine, because you
Mhm.
get to do that besides, of course, the clinical care
Mhm.
and decision making. But to me, it's working through that and having that
Uh-huh.
to use those skills of
Yes.
working through problems like that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. You mentioned that you want to go into surgery. I love that. We need more Latina surgeons in
Mhm.
this country. And that's so awesome that you want to go that route. As we wrap up here, if you had one piece of advice for either your younger self or for other students who are in college and navigating the
Mhm.
pre-medical journey, what would it be?
Oh man, so many things you learn along the way. I would say at least something that has constantly come up for me is perseverance and being resilient, because as minorities, we do have different struggles than other populations. So if you fall, just get back up. As cliche as it sounds, get back up again and keep going, because
Mhm.
you can stay on the ground, cry a little bit, be in that moment, but then get back up,
Mhm.
because that's how you can get further, is by getting back up and going forward again. So at least to me, it's shown me that resilience and perseverance is something that can take you very, very far. Because if you
Mhm.
want to give up, like, you can, and that's where things will end. So it's all a choice. Everything's a choice. Everything's about how you frame things and perspective. Even to this day, as you know, in clinic, we talk about perspectives and how much of an impact that makes, and how you choose
Mhm.
to see things, and how you
Mhm.
choose to let something affect you. And
Mhm.
so that's what I would say, is just keep that in mind. And also, on a very different note, is they call it health hygiene. Just make sure you take care of yourself. I had the notion, at least freshman year of college,
Yeah.
that, oh, if I do want to go into med school, I know they don't really sleep a lot. So I had that notion that I had to not sleep,
Yeah.
because that's what I would be doing in the future. So I might as well get used to it now,
Right.
right? So I was very wrong, let's just put it that
Mhm.
way.
Yeah.
And so I learned that, like, you have to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, then it's harder to take care of others, right?
Mhm.
So make sure
Yeah.
that you're balancing well in terms of, like, your sleep, your food, your
Mhm.
exercise, because you can't wait till you're done with med school to start taking care of yourself. You have
Mhm.
to do it along the way and find
Yeah.
time along the way. And that's something that has been fun and challenging during med school,
Uh-huh.
is balancing that, or making sure you implement that. And the more you
Mhm.
have those skills in high school or in undergrad, the easier it is to transition. Because if you know you prioritize your fitness for an hour,
Mhm.
then that's something that becomes a habit, and you can continue to do that in med school.
Yes.
And so that's good for your body, and also for your mind and your overall well-being, and
Mhm.
your success and outcome. So yeah, so that's something I emphasize a lot, because I can see how much it can impact someone. So yeah,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
yeah, keep going at it, and remember that the only person that can stop you is yourself. And even though if someone doesn't like you, like your advisor or something like that, it's how much you let that affect you, and how they can't stop you from doing your best and
Mhm.
going after your goals. So yeah,
Mhm.
so a
Yes.
little bit of everything there.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I couldn't agree more with both of those lessons, the importance of perseverance, because, like you said earlier, the only person that can stop you is yourself most of the time. I mean, barring like a lightning storm coming and striking you and killing you, or
Mhm.
like a tragic
Mhm.
accident
Yeah,
or tragic
yeah.
illness, most of the time it really is us that stop ourselves from doing something
Mhm,
because we don't believe in ourselves. And the
mhm,
more, I like how you said, just pick yourself up. And in my experience, the more I practiced picking myself up, dusting myself off, and just continuing the path,
mhm,
the better I got at it. And so in the
mhm,
beginning, when I first fell and I first failed, it
mhm,
was devastating and it was so hard. And then by the
mhm,
20th time, I was like, okay, I've struggled before.
mhm,
I've gotten good at just
mhm.
continuing on, right? Of
Yeah.
getting up. And it gets easier because you're like, oh, okay, this is a challenge, but I've faced challenges before and they
Mhm,
don't have to be the end of the path. I can keep going.
mhm,
I can keep going. I can keep learning. I can keep improving. I can keep
mhm,
evolving in this journey.
mhm,
I love that. And then also your
mhm,
emphasis on self care, because I agree. Too many people say, oh, once I'm done with pre-med and I get into med school,
mhm,
then I will take care of myself. And then med school kicks you in the butt. And then you're like, oh,
mhm,
once I finish med school, I'll take care of myself. And then
mhm,
residency kicks you in the butt. And then people just keep on deferring and
mhm,
deferring and
mhm,
deferring caring for themselves. And that's not a healthy way to live. And it's not a healthy way to be a physician, because as a
mhm,
physician, it's very important that you be an example to your
mhm,
patients of
mhm,
health and of
mhm,
well-being.
mhm,
And how can someone who is sick and unhealthy from a mental and
mhm,
physiological perspective be the best caregiver
mhm,
for their patients, right? And so we have to
mhm,
practice what we preach from a very early stage.
mhm,
It's not easy to do from the beginning. We have a whole episode on
mhm,
it for our listeners
mhm,
who want to learn more
mhm.
about this topic. It's on self-care, and so I encourage you to listen to it. But thank you so much, Jocelyn, for sharing your story, for being vulnerable, for being honest about your story. And congratulations on being where you are today. You're amazing, and you're going to be a fantastic surgeon someday. Thank you for
Thank
helping
you.
to inspire others.
Thank you so much, and happy to share. If you want to give out my email, happy to be of service to anyone.
Thank you so much.
Have a
And
good
for
one.
all our listeners, thanks for listening. Until next time.